Welcome to Audiobook 365 Stories.
The other day I saw a wedding. But no, I think it's better to tell you about the Christmas tree. The wedding was nice. I liked it a lot. But something else happened, and it was even better. I don't know why, but when I saw the wedding, I remembered the Christmas tree. Here's what happened. 5 years ago, on New Year's Eve, I was invited to a children's party. The person who gave the party was an important man. He knew a lot of people and had many things to do. It seemed like this party was a way to bring the parents together so they could talk about different things. I didn't know anyone there, and I didn't have anything interesting to say. So I spent the evening by myself. There was another man at the party. He wasn't special or important, and he was there like me just by chance. He was the first person I noticed. He was tall, thin, and serious. He wore very nice clothes, but you could see he wasn't having fun. When he went to a corner, he stopped smiling and made his face look angry. He didn't know anyone at the party except the man who invited him. He looked very bored, but he tried hard to look happy. I later learned that this man was from another town. He had some problems to take care of in Petersburg, and he had brought a letter to the man who invited him. The host didn't really want to help, but out of kindness, he invited the man to the children's party. The man didn't play cards. Nobody offered him cigars, and everyone stayed away from him. So the man just sat there, stroking his whiskers because he had nothing else to do with his hands. His whiskers were really nice. He stroked them so much that it seemed like the whiskers were more important than the man, and he was just there to touch them. There was another man at the party who also caught my attention. But he was very different. He was an important person. His name was Yulian Mastakovich. From the first look, you could tell he was a special guest. The host and hostess treated him with great respect, just like they expected others to treat them. They said many nice things to him, gave him drinks, and introduced him to all the guests, but nobody introduced him to anyone else. I noticed that the host almost cried when he said this was one of the best evenings he had ever had. I felt a little scared being around such an important person. So, after watching the children for a bit, I went to a small room that was empty. There was a big flower decoration there, and I sat down next to it. The children were all very sweet. They did not want to act like the adults, no matter how much their governesses and mothers told them to. They quickly took all the sweets off the Christmas tree and broke half the toys before even knowing what toy was for what. One boy with black eyes and curly hair was especially fun. He kept trying to shoot me with his wooden toy gun. But my attention went more to his sister. She was an 11-year-old girl, very quiet and dreamy, with big eyes and pale skin. She looked like a little Cupid. The other children upset her in some way, so she came to the empty room where I was sitting and played with her doll in the corner. The guests quietly pointed out her father, who was a rich man. Someone whispered that her family had already saved 300,000 rubles for her dowry. I turned around to look at the people talking about this. I saw Yulian Mastakovich standing with his hands behind his back and his head to one side, listening very carefully to what they were saying. Later, I couldn't help but notice how smart the host and hostess were in giving the children their presents. The little girl, who already had a dowry of 300,000 rubles, got the most expensive doll. Then the presents got smaller in value, depending on how important the children's parents were. Finally, the least important child, a thin, freckled boy with red hair, got only a book of stories about nature. The book didn't even have pictures. He was the son of a poor widow who worked as the governess for the children of the house. He looked sad and scared. He was wearing a short jacket made from cheap fabric. After he got his book, the red-haired boy walked around the other toys for a long time. He wanted to play with the other children, but he was too shy. It was clear that he knew he was not like the other children. I like watching children. Their first steps in life are very interesting. I noticed that the red-haired boy really liked the expensive toys, especially a little toy theater. He wanted to play with it so badly that he decided to forget his pride. He smiled and started playing with the other children. He gave his apple to a fat boy who already had a lot of sweets tied in a handkerchief. He even let another boy ride on his back, just so he wouldn't be left out of playing with the theater. But then, another rude boy hit him hard. The red-haired boy didn't cry. Then, his mother, the governess, came and told him not to disturb the other children. The boy left and went to the room where the little girl was playing with her doll. She let him join her, and they both started playing happily, dressing up the expensive doll. I had been sitting in the flower corner for more than half an hour, listening to the red-haired boy and the rich girl with the 300,000 rubles, who was taking care of her doll. Suddenly, Yulian Mastakovich came into the room. He had taken advantage of the noise after a fight between some of the children to slip out of the other room. I had seen him earlier, talking very nicely to the rich girl's father. Now, Yulian stood in the room, looking like he was thinking hard and counting something on his fingers. 300, Yulian Mastakovich was whispering. 11, 12, 13, and so on. 16, 5 years. If the interest is 4%, 5 times 12 is 60. Yes, 60. But he won't keep it at 4%, that clever man. He can get 8 or 10%. Well, 500, let's say 500 at least. That's certain. Maybe a little more for extra things. He stopped thinking and blew his nose. He was about to leave the room when he suddenly looked at the little girl and stopped. He did not see me behind the plants. I thought he was very excited. Maybe his thinking had made him imagine something, or maybe it was something else, because he rubbed his hands and looked like he couldn't stand still. His excitement grew even more when he stared again at the little girl who would inherit the money. He wanted to move closer to her, but first looked around. Then, walking on his toes, as if he was doing something wrong, he went towards the children. He came with a small smile, bent down, and kissed the girl on her head. The girl didn't expect this and cried out in surprise. "What are you doing here, sweet child?" he asked in a quiet voice. looking around and patting her cheek. "We are playing," she said. "Ah." With him, Yulian Mastakovich glanced at the boy. "You should go to the other room, my dear," he said to the boy. The boy looked at him with wide eyes and didn't say anything. Yulian Mastakovich looked around again and bent down to talk to the girl. "And what is this you have? A dolly, sweet child?" he asked. "Yes, a dolly," the girl said, frowning and feeling a bit shy. "A dolly? And do you know, dear child, what your dolly is made of?" "I don't know," the girl whispered, lowering her head. "It's made of rags, darling. You should go to the other room to play, boy," Yulian Mastakovich said, looking sternly at the boy. The boy and girl frowned and held each other's hands. They didn't want to be separated. "And do you know why they gave you that doll?" Yulian Mastakovich asked, speaking more softly and gently. "I don't know. Because you have been a sweet and good girl all week." At this moment, Yulian Mastakovich became even more excited. He spoke in a very soft voice, almost like he couldn't wait anymore. His voice was full of emotion as he asked, "And will you love me, sweet little girl, when I come to see your papa and mama?" As he said this, Yulian Mastakovich tried to kiss the little girl again, but the red-haired boy saw that she was about to cry. He held her hand tightly and started to whimper because he felt sorry for her. Yulian Mastakovich became truly angry. "Go away. Go away from here. Go away," Yulian Mastakovich said to the boy. "Go to the other room. Go to your playmates." "No, he doesn't have to go." "You go away," said the little girl. "Leave him alone. Leave him alone," she said, almost crying. Someone made a noise at the door. Yulian Mastakovich quickly stood up and looked worried. But the red-haired boy was even more scared than Yulian Mastakovich. He let go of the little girl and quietly slipped out of the room, staying close to the wall. He went into the dining room. To avoid making anyone suspicious, Yulian Mastakovich also went into the dining room. His face was as red as a lobster, and when he looked in the mirror, he seemed embarrassed. Maybe he was upset with himself for acting so quickly and rashly. Perhaps he had been so focused on his money thoughts, so excited by them, that he forgot his usual serious self and behaved like a child, trying to talk to the girl who wouldn't really matter for another 5 years. I followed Yulian Mastakovich into the dining room and saw something strange. Yulian Mastakovich, red and angry, was scaring the red-haired boy. The boy, scared, didn't know where to run. "Go away. What are you doing here? Are you trying to steal fruit? Huh? Get out of here, you naughty boy. Go to your playmates, you crybaby." The frightened boy, not knowing what to do, tried to crawl under the table. Then Yulian Mastakovich, very angry, pulled out his large handkerchief and started waving it under the table at the boy. The boy stayed very quiet. It's important to say that Yulian Mastakovich was a bit fat. He had a round body, thick legs, and a big belly. He was sweating, out of breath, and very red in the face. He was so mad, and maybe, who knows, he was even jealous. I couldn't help it and started laughing out loud. Yulian Mastakovich turned around and, even though he was very important, looked very embarrassed. At that moment, our host came into the room. The boy crawled out from under the table, wiping his elbows and knees. Yulian Mastakovich quickly put the handkerchief to his nose to hide what he was doing. Our host looked at the three of us, not sure what was happening, but being a smart man, he saw a chance to talk to Yulian Mastakovich alone. "Here, this is the boy," the host said, pointing to the red-haired boy, "for whom I asked for your help." "Ah," said Yulian Mastakovich, who was still a little shaken. "He is the son of my children's governess," the host continued, in a kind voice. "A poor woman, the widow of an honest government worker. So, Yulian Mastakovich, if you could help—" "Oh, no, no," Yulian Mastakovich quickly said. "No, I'm sorry, Philip Alexeyevich, it's not possible. I've checked, and there's no job available. Even if there was, there are 20 other people who deserve it more than him. I'm very sorry, very sorry." "What a shame," said our host. "He is a quiet and well-behaved boy. A big troublemaker, as I see," replied Yulian Mastakovich with a nervous smile. "Go on, boy. Why are you standing here? Go to your playmates," he said to the boy. Then Yulian Mastakovich couldn't hold back and glanced at me with one eye. I couldn't hold back either, and laughed right in his face. Yulian Mastakovich quickly turned away, and in a voice loud enough for me to hear, asked who that strange young man was. They whispered together and left the room. I saw Yulian Mastakovich shaking his head in disbelief while our host talked to him. After I had a good laugh, I went back to the drawing room. There, the important man, Yulian Mastakovich, was surrounded by fathers and mothers, including our host and hostess. He was talking very excitedly to a lady he had just met. The lady was holding the hand of the little girl Yulian Mastakovich had spoken to earlier in the other room. Now he was praising the little girl's beauty, talents, and lovely manners. He was clearly trying to get on the mother's good side. The mother listened to him with happy tears in her eyes. The father was smiling. Our host was pleased that everyone seemed happy. All the guests were also smiling, feeling happy for the family. Even the children's games were stopped so they wouldn't interrupt the conversation. Everyone was showing great respect. Later, I heard the mother, very touched, politely ask Yulian Mastakovich to become their close friend. I heard him happily accept the invitation. After that, the guests, very proper and polite, said many kind words about the contractor, his wife, their little girl, and most of all about Yulian Mastakovich. "Is that man married?" I asked almost out loud to one of my friends standing near Yulian Mastakovich. Yulian Mastakovich shot me a sharp and angry look. "No," my friend answered, clearly upset by my rude question, which I had asked on purpose. "Recently I walked by a church. I noticed many people in carriages and heard them talking about a wedding. The day was cloudy, and it started to snow a little. I pushed through the crowd at the door and saw the groom. He was a fat, round man with nice clothes. He was running around, giving orders. Then people whispered that the bride was coming. I squeezed through the crowd and saw a very beautiful girl. She looked young, maybe just having her first social season. But she looked sad and serious. Her face was pale, and it seemed like she had been crying. Her face was perfect, with sharp features that made her look proud and serious. But even with her sad and serious look, she still seemed innocent, like a child. Her eyes seemed to ask for kindness. People were saying that she was only 16 years old. I looked closely at the groom and suddenly realized that it was Yulian Mastakovich, the man I hadn't seen in 5 years. I looked at the girl again. My God! I quickly pushed my way out of the church. As I left, I heard people in the crowd saying that the bride was rich, with a dowry of 500,000 and very expensive clothes. It was a smart business deal, I thought as I walked into the street.